So, yeah, conquistadors and their aftermath, of course, the conquest of America. So we'll be going into, of course, some of the most famous of the conquistadors. Yeah, later I'll put up some videos I have, of course, on the conquistadors. I've got a bunch of them you can, of course, review. I actually made this movie I'll show you later, too. It's kind of like a review movie for you to go over the main conquistadors, but I'll post that, too, on my YouTube channel. And, yeah, these two you're looking at here in the picture are really the most famous. Hernan Cortes might be the most famous overall of the conquistadors. The guy who conquered Mexico. And then Francisco Pizarro on the right. Of course, the guy that conquered Peru and the Inca Empire. Yeah, those two are probably the most ruthless, the two most famous that really invaded the Americas, in the 1500s. So we'll get into the, of course, conquistadors today. And, of course, I told you to research it a little bit, I think, in that announcement I gave you over the weekend about the conquistadors. And, of course, they call it different names. You'll see in that video of Michael Wood that a lot of people called it the conquista. The conquest is what it means in English. And conquistadors were these Spanish, sometimes Portuguese, mercenaries, soldiers that left Spain, and they came to the Americas to seek like their fortune and also land. And they weren't necessarily in it for like religion or for the crown. I think a lot of them were really doing it for themselves, to get wealthy and all that. And one of the things I usually mention about, usually when I talk about the conquistadors, is a lot of them searched for lost cities of gold. I don't know if you have heard about this, but there's a lot of legends that they always talk about with the conquistadors. All these different legends that were real popular. I think the two most famous ones were El Dorado, which you may have heard of, or the other one, which was also called Cibola or Cibola, I think how they say it. Somebody Cibola usually. And El Dorado was the South American legend of a lost city of gold that was ruled by this Native American king, who people called El Dorado. El Dorado meant different translations. I think usually it meant the golden man or the golden king. And there was this legend where these Native American people would have these rituals where they would cover themselves with gold dust and dive into a lake. And they would throw like jewelry into it and jewels and things like that. And so this spawned a lot of these conquistadors to want to go to the Americas and conquer. I think also they thought that there were like these cities of gold where they could just practically pick gold off the roof and things like that. And those were kind of stories that were real popular. Cibola was also called another name, which is, I'll put it, it's kind of a Spanish name they called it, but Cibola Equivera, I think is what they called it as well, which was also called sometimes the so-called 7 cities of gold, which is, I think, a popular name. They called it later. And that was actually believed to be somewhere in like where North America is, like New Mexico, Arizona, which I'll talk about Coronado later, who tried to seek that. And but I think a lot of these places didn't really exist, and these were more like legends that kind of came about either from the New World or from, I think, even the Old World as well. So anyway, just stories about this, what kind of fueled people to eventually come to the New World. But a lot of them like were seeking fortunes, to get wealthy, like real quick. All right. Now, of course, one of the first conquistadors to come to the Americas is not him, but what is Ponce de Leon. Juan Ponce de Leon, who you see, of course, the picture of again, who's up here. He was one of the first to come to the Americas. And Ponce de Leon was a conquistador and explorer who originally came with Columbus. You saw in the video on his second voyage in the 1490s. And you know about Ponce de Leon. Of course, they mentioned about the fact that Ponce de Leon was the one who helped conquer Puerto Rico, and then he was basically made governor of the island of Puerto Rico. And eventually he heard about this legend, which was the Fountain of Youth, which some people think is just a made-up story. But the natives, which I think were Taino, who were on Puerto Rico, told him of this land to the north that was rich. The land was rich, and so he got together an expedition. And so in 1513, he sailed northwestward up through the Bahamas. You can see the route that Ponce de Leon took here. And he landed, they think he landed somewhere up here in the northeastern coast of Florida on the Atlantic side, close to where St. Augustine would be, founded in the 1560s, 1565 is the year. And his forces, like his expedition, then may have sailed down here to where Miami is. And they think he went up to like Tampa Bay area, maybe. There's even theories that Ponce de Leon may have even explored into the Panhandle, close to where Pensacola is, but they're not sure about that. So they find this landmass here. And of course, Ponce de Leon is the one that calls it Florida, which you saw in the video. They called it Florida because of the Spanish nickname for Easter, which is dubbed that. Pascua Florida or something like that. He did come back. Of course, they don't have that in the map there, but he did come back. He went back to Puerto Rico, and then in 1521, he had a second expedition where he tried to go back to Florida, but he was killed by Native Americans. I do have I'll put up the video later that you saw in that. I'll put a more better description in there about Ponce de Leon in the description part of it. So I'm kind of working on that right now. So that was Ponce de Leon. The Spanish thought Florida was actually an island, but of course later on, they find out that it's actually a peninsula, which is part of North America. And so, yeah, Ponce de Leon was one of the first to actually explore part of like the southern part of North America. And the Spanish would come back, several times. Moving on also to Panama area, which is, in Central America. You also had another explorer and conquistador named Vasco de Balboa, or Vasco Nunez de Balboa, that they call him. And Balboa was a Spanish explorer that came to Panama closer to 1500. He was involved in the founding of what is a city called Santa Maria, which is now, I think, in part of Colombia today here. Eventually, over time, he became like an early governor of Panama. And then when he was there, he heard about the fact that there was some kind of sea that was to the south that was there. And Balboa was in search of trying to find gold, like other conquistadors. And so he took a force of around 200 men, and he was one of the first to cross the Americas, from the east to the west coast, from the Atlantic to the Pacific side. And he actually crossed the Isthmus of Panama in 1513. And of course, Balboa became one of the first, as you know, to first European to see the Pacific Ocean and also explore it, which he would around the coast. I think he even got ships and explored what is called they call them the Pearl Islands, which are off the coast of Panama right here. And that, of course, would influence the Spanish later to explore more of the Pacific, including what is Magellan's voyage, which we've already talked about. Balboa did find a lot of gold. He was one of the very few, by the way, I think, that found gold maybe in that area at the time. And eventually they would find Panama City as well, which would be in 1519. So that was who Balboa was. I also have a little video on him I'll put up later. You can also look at more on him. Then they had another expedition, which I kind of don't talk much about usually, but I'll go ahead and mention about it. But it is famous. It's called the Panfilo Narvaez expedition, which happened in the 1520s, and it kind of goes up to like the 1530s. And Narvaez was a conquistador that was involved with the conquest of Mexico. I think he was kind of helped Cortez conquer Mexico back in the early 1520s, roughly. And anyway, his expedition was this expedition that the Spanish sent to explore Florida again. They were going to conquer it, and I think they had the idea to eventually colonize that area that Juan Ponce de Leon had already gone into at that point. And he had about, I think it was like, I want to say 500 men that were with the expedition originally with ships, and they sailed up to Florida. However, what happened was a hurricane came up, wiped out most of their fleet, and a lot of their horses were killed. There's an area on the west coast close to Tampa Bay that is called the Bay of Horses now. And a lot of his horses all drowned and died, and a lot of his men died too. And Narvaez, I think, was killed. I think he got drowned or whatever. And some of the men were able to get in the ships, and they sailed westward, and they reached close to Texas, when it's Galveston Island, they believe, and they ended up there. 4 of the men survived, and they got enslaved by Indians, which is kind of crazy. And one of the guys that survived was a guy named Alvar Nunez, who was called Cabeza de Vaca. And anyway, he and his 4 men eventually escaped from Indian slavery. They walked on foot into Texas, or through Texas, and into Mexico. Cabeza de Vaca is a nickname, by the way, which means, by the way, head of a cow. And they believe in 1536, some conquistadors found Cabeza de Vaca and the other 3 survivors. They thought they were Indians because they were so dressed badly. And they even, I guess, had learned how to speak some of the native tongue, which is kind of weird. Anyway, Cabeza de Vaca wrote a book I'll mention, which is kind of important. Which I'll put up here. It's called the Account, which I think in Spanish was called La Relation. It was dubbed the Account, and it goes into Cabeza de Vaca's, I guess, explorations of like the Gulf Coast area around Texas and all that. And he also describes a lot of the Native Americans that lived throughout that area. And Cabeza de Vaca's book was kind of like an early anthropological work. It was like kind of like a form of anthropology, but he was kind of like considered an early anthropologist himself, with living among the different Indian tribes and all that. The book also talked about all these Native Americans that lived throughout that area, who lived in various villages. And anyway, apparently de Vaca heard about this legend of a lost city of gold that was called Cibola. I told you about earlier, which is sometimes called that. And anyway, that book, of course, that he wrote influenced Coronado, influenced De Soto, both those conquistadors that came later. And so that's why they later come back and explore. In fact, Coronado explores the areas he explores because of apparently reading about this book or hearing about the book and some other people that talked about it and all that. But yeah, the Narvaez expedition was a total failure, basically. But it influenced other conquistadors to come back, and eventually explore. Then they got some minor ones that were, also in the North America that were involved as well. Of course, Hernando de Soto, you probably heard of him in his expedition. De Soto, usually for short. And De Soto was another famous conquistador. He was also an explorer as well. I don't know if that birth date's correct. I see different dates on his birth date. He may have been born closer to 1500. But anyway, De Soto was originally involved in the conquest of Peru. He helped Francisco Pizarro conquer the Inca Empire and defeat the Inca ruler, which is, I'll get to him later, Atahualpa, you may have heard of. De Soto was also involved in exploration and conquests in Nicaragua, believe it or not. You may have heard of the guy named Cordoba. He was a conquistador who conquered Nicaragua. He was, I think, in there. I believe that's correct. He also was involved in some explorations into the Yucatan. He was all over the place, De Soto, as an explorer. And he was very wealthy. He got very wealthy, of course, off the conquests of the Spanish. And he was given a commission to eventually explore North America around 1540 and conquer it. And so De Soto got together an expedition that involved a huge group. I think it was like 600 men that were involved. And they were going to try to find some kind of settlement. They were going to create like a colony there in Florida, as they called it at the time. And I think they were also trying to search for gold. And of course, you see there, it does say that they were kind of maybe trying to find like a passage to China, which a lot of conquistadors were looking for as well. This expedition lasted about 3 years, from 1539 to about 1542. I do have a map showing his expedition. I've got a video too I'll put up later on De Soto as well. I've got with more description on De Soto. But that's the route they think he took. And it's kind of debated about where he went on his expedition. But they do think he landed in Florida, close to the Tampa Bay area, same area where Narvaez landed and wiped out. I think they even found some remnants of the expedition there when they landed there. They also went up to through Georgia, South Carolina. They do think he was one of the first to go up into the Appalachian Mountains that are in like North Carolina, the western part. Also eastern Tennessee, probably went through the Smoky Mountains. Came down through Georgia, then Alabama, and they think he may have come down to or at least some of his men may have come down to where Mobile is down here to get resupplied, they think, anyway. Then he went up through Mississippi, northern Mississippi, and then there's a debate about where he crossed the Mississippi River, because if you know about De Soto, is one of the first Europeans to supposedly sight the Mississippi River in the 16th century. He was actually one of the first to cross it, which there's a debate about where it was. Some people think he crossed close to Memphis, Tennessee. Then some people think he crossed somewhere west of Tupelo in the northwestern part of Mississippi, like around here. So they're not sure about that. Explored Arkansas. They think he may have gone into Oklahoma, but they're not sure about that. Maybe Louisiana. I don't know about that or not. But some people think he may have even gone into Texas, like where Nacogdoches is and all that area over here. He died of some illness in 1542. I'm not sure what killed him, but they think somewhere up in like the eastern part of Arkansas is where he died. Some people think maybe Louisiana up here, they also say too. But this map says like eastern, northeastern, I guess southeastern really, Arkansas. And they actually buried him in the river because the natives thought that he was a god. At least they told him that. Anyway, I guess they wouldn't mess with him. And then the rest of the force, they think, may have, this may be in the route they took back this way. They went back towards Mexico. They arrived back in 1542 in Mexico City. So that's the route that De Soto took on the expedition. But they didn't find any gold. That was one thing that was kind of disappointing to a lot of the Spanish. But it did influence a lot of the Spanish to come back later and explore. And in northeastern Florida, in September of 1565, the Spanish would eventually found first settlement, which was St. Augustine, Florida, in September of 1565. So it will be about 30 years later, I guess, they come back or whatever, 30, 40 years later. Less than that, really. But, yeah, the lack of gold was something that really disappointed, I think, the Spanish a lot. So then they had Coronado, who, of course, was another famous conquistador. He's kind of infamous as a conquistador and explorer, especially how he treated the Native American populations throughout the region of North America. And Coronado, who was he? He was this Spanish that had come to the New World and settled in New Spain. And he became a governor of northwestern Mexico, which I think was called, if you want to know, it's in that, I'll give you a little video later on it, which has more stuff on it. But it was called New Galicia, I think they called it. I think it's what they dubbed the little state. And he was like the governor of it. It's kind of located on the Pacific, like in the northwestern part of Mexico. And when he was there, he heard about a rumor of the lost cities of gold from the survivors of the Cabeza de Vaca expedition with Narvaez. And so he decided to get together a force in 1540. I think it's like 500-600 men or so at the most. I think there's more than 300, I think, involved in it, actually. This expedition went up through northern Mexico, close to where the Gulf of California is. And he crossed into what is Arizona. And he would explore Arizona, New Mexico predominantly. I've got a route showing you where he actually went. And you can see actually when he went up in there, he found a bunch of these Native American peoples that lived there, which are called the Pueblo Indians. I don't know if I've got that in there about that. But I'll put this on the screen. But the Pueblo Indians were Indians that lived like the most famous, I think, were the Zuni that he encountered, the Pueblo Indians. The Pueblo Indians were these Indians that lived in these huts that were made of mud. They're called Pueblo huts, I guess. Lived like around, like under cliffs, I think, if you know about this, in the southwest regions of the United States. The Zuni were the most famous, of course, that were there. He encountered them and found a lot of their villages that were there throughout the Southwest in what is Arizona and New Mexico. And he was really disappointed, by the way, when he got there. He thought they would have all these lost cities of gold that would be there. Like he thought that Cibola y Cuivre, they'd find it there all over the place. Of course, they weren't there. And there was actually this Indian guide he had. I don't know if you know about him, but I don't think I have that one for you, but in those little videos. But his name was the Turk, they called him. And he kept guiding them all over the Southwest. He was some kind of Indian, I think, that spoke their language. And he guided them throughout the region, saying, oh, it's this way. He kept leading more eastward and eastward, towards the Midwest and I think the Great Plains and all that. But he would actually never find it, any lost cities of gold or anything like that. And you can see the route he took. They believe he actually went close to where Albuquerque and Santa Fe will be later, which will be founded by the Spanish when they come back about something like 40 years later. And eventually you can see they may have gone through Texas, like the so-called panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, and then reaches all the way to where the Kansas River is. in the state of Kansas. And supposedly he claims he found this Indian village that was there in 1541, which he called Quivera. He thought that might be the site of the lost city of gold, but all of their roofs were made of like thatched roofs that were made of, I think, straw or something like that he actually found. He thinks that they think that the Native Americans that he encountered, at least in Kansas, were probably related to the Wichita Indians that you hear about later that live in that area. That are an example of like various Plains Indians that are there later in the future. But he didn't really find anything. And then from there, from 1541 to 42, he made his way back to Mexico. And this expedition was kind of deemed a failure of Coronado. Now, some of his men also explored parts of the Colorado River basin. I don't know if you know about this right here. He didn't really personally do it himself, Coronado, but some of his men did. And they found the Grand Canyon. I don't know if you know about this. They were the first to actually discover it, first Europeans anyway. And some of Coronado's men even tried to descend into the canyon, try to reach to the riverbed that was down there, but it was just too steep of a decline to get down, so they turned back. But believe it or not, you would think that they were the conquistadors would have been, I guess, impressed with the Grand Canyon. A lot of them were. I think it was one guy that wrote about it. I remember reading about that was impressed with the view of it, but the other guys were like kind of miffed about it because they didn't find any gold. In fact, they didn't find any gold in this whole search. Throughout the southwest part of the United States, anyway. But anyway, yeah, some of his men also explored like the Gulf of California, which originally was called the Sea of Cortez, because Cortez originally found the Gulf of California in the 1520s. But they say the whole thing bankrupted Coronado. Poor guy, he went bankrupt, I think, the rest of his life. And so, yeah, a lot of these conquistadors, they didn't make much money. You would think a lot of them did, but a lot of them didn't make any money much with some of these explorations that they did. But the Spanish would come back, like I think 40 years later, and they would start kind of creating cities up in here, like Santa Fe, Albuquerque. Those will all be created, by the Spanish. They try to convert the Indians to, Catholicism. All right, then you've got, of course, the ones that were the more famous explorers, that were big, which were, of course, were Cortez and Francisco Pizarro. Of course, I have a video I'll show you later, of course, on Cortez. And anyway, let me try to put that up there. I don't know why it won't go up there for some reason. Let me get that on the screen. Oh, there it is right there. So Cortez, he was actually not really a trained soldier. Like most conquistadors, if you know about it, had been soldiers in Spain. A lot of them participated in the what they call the Reconquista. I don't know if you know what that is, but the Reconquista was the Spanish conquest of southern Spain from Muslims, like the Moors that lived in the southern part. It took them 700 years for the Europeans to reconquer that area. And Spain had all these surplus of young men that didn't have anything to do. And so when they heard about Columbus and all these discoveries and started seeing gold coming in into Spain from the New World, a lot of them decided to seek their fortune. Cortez was one of these men. Actually, Cortez was like a schoolboy. He was actually, I think, a teenager. His parents wanted him to be a lawyer. He was actually a trained notary, like a notary public, basically. So anyway, he came to the New World, I think, to what is Hispaniola first, then Cuba. And then he heard about Mexico, and so he got together an expedition to eventually invade Mexico, which he actually paid out of his own pocket, believe it or not. So Cortez becomes famous for his conquest of the Aztec Empire in Mexico. Anyway, his forces, which was, I think, about 500-600 men about, left Cuba, and they entered Mexico about 1519 into what is the Yucatan. The Yucatan Peninsula is where they came to first originally. And they conquered part of like the Yucatan, like around the Tabasco region, which is kind of like in the central eastern part of it, roughly. And so that was the first area that they really conquered. So he conquers first the Yucatan, and I'll put it on the screen if you want to spell the Yucatan for you. It's right here. And when he was there, he gets a bunch of slave girls that he acquires, maybe 20 of them, I know. Some of them spoke Maya, and they also spoke the Aztec language, which was called Nahuatl. There was a woman that he got, if you know about it, named La Malinche. They always talk about. I think I might have a slide on her. I don't know if I had a slide on La Malinche or not. If I did, let me see if I got one on her or not. I don't know if I do. I don't think I've got one on La Malinche. Nah, I guess I don't. Let me see. Yeah, there she is. I do have one on her. They call her different names. Malinitsin, I think they called her, I think. And then, of course, the more common name is Donna Marina. Donna Marina. They dubbed her. La Malinche, I think, meant the captain's woman or something like that. That's what they dubbed her. Malintzin, I think is how they say it actually. And anyway, she spoke Nahuatl, which was the Aztec language. This gave Cortez kind of an advantage in conquering the New World, like the Aztecs, because basically, hey, Alexandra, we're covering the Conquistadors today, of course, but La Malinche knew the language, of the Aztecs. And so when Cortez met the Aztecs, like some of their ambassadors and all that, he could understand them. They couldn't understand the Spanish, of course. And that would later give him a better leg up when he would eventually have to invade Mexico and face the Emperor of Mexico, which we'll talk about later, whose name is Montezuma as well. Also, La Malinche was Cortez's translator, but also his mistress. He would have a son with her whose name was Martin Cortes. And Martin Cortes, by the way, was considered the first, what they call mestizo. What else too? I think that's enough about her. Also, of course, this is the route that Cortez would take, of course, to conquer Mexico and Veracruz, which is on the Gulf of Mexico. Cortez's forces would come up the coast from the Yucatan, and they would settle here, and Cortez would help settle Veracruz, the city of Veracruz in Mexico, founded it. And then from there, he would push westward across central Mexico toward what is the capital of Mexico, you see here, which is called Tenochtitlan. Of course, the capital is now located where Mexico City is. And of course, Tenochtitlan was at the time the capital of the Aztec Empire that was there. The Aztec Empire was a kind of like a Mesoamerican, Native American empire of Native American peoples. They were called Aztec. That's what the Spanish called them. They also were called other names like Nahuatl, which was their language. And then another name was also the Mexica. Yeah, Mexica, M-E-X-I-C-A, like Mexican. And they were dubbed that too as well. And the ruler, of course, of Mexico at the time was Emperor Montezuma. He had been reigning about 20 years as the ruler. And Montezuma, of course, thought the Spanish were like gods. So he thought Cortez was a god at least. And this gave Cortez a big advantage when he came in. There was a famous Aztec god I'll mention, which is called Quetzalcoatl, which you may have heard of, which is the Aztec feather serpent god. I'll put it on the board. And this particular god, there was a legend about it, that one day that god would return to what is Mexico. It was supposed to be like a white person with a beard, which of course Cortez and his men looked like. And so they thought, Cortez was a god and all that. And so Montezuma could have killed him, because Montezuma had like thousands of troops that he could have killed him, basically. And so what Montezuma basically did, if you know about it, put him up in his palace, basically. And eventually, within a couple months, what happened was that Cortez took advantage of that, because they thought he was a god, and basically kidnapped Montezuma, held him at ransom, and basically told him, hey, if you don't do what I say, I'm going to kill you, basically. So Montezuma becomes this like puppet ruler of Cortez and his men. However, if you know what happened was, there was a case where they had what they call Noche Triste. Happened on, I'll give you the date, June 30th, 1520, basically. And Noche Triste. Of course, the video of Michael Wood, that documentary, they'll go way into more detail about what happened with Cortez and Montezuma with the conquest. But Noche Triste, that was June 30th, the night of June 30th, 1520. The Aztecs actually revolted. They threw Cortez and his men out of Tenochtitlan, the capital. Noche Triste means in Spanish the sad night, or I think it's also translated as meaning the night of sorrows or night of tears. And those men that, I guess, that didn't escape with Cortez were killed by Montezuma's, Montezuma's, actually what was Montezuma's troops. Montezuma actually was killed, I think, after that, before that actually happened. But you'll see in the video, they actually kill him, is one of the things that happens. But so Cortez would flee the city of Tenochtitlan with whatever gold and men he could take with him. And one of the things that helped, you'll see in the video, that documentary later, was that Indian allies actually helped Cortez conquer Mexico. That's one of the things that actually occurred. They'll talk about the Tlaxcala or Tlaxcalans that are kind of, I think, to the east of what is Mexico City and Tenochtitlan. And they actually will join up with Cortez and actually conquer Mexico for him. Why did they do that? They did it because they hated basically Montezuma and his empire and all of that. And they were glad to basically, kill them off. And of course, the Tlaxcalans would survive after this. You'll see in the video, they talk about how they kind of get to keep their culture. They probably converted to Catholicism and all that, but they get to keep their culture, their language, and all that. I guess they saw the writing on the wall of the Spanish coming, that they were more superior. And so I guess they decided to join them, instead. I guess if we can't beat them, join them, was their philosophy about it. So that's how Cortez is able to, conquer. He'll actually go back to Tenochtitlan, lay siege to it. You'll see in the video, and he'll conquer it by 1521. And so After that, what will happen was that Mexico City is founded by Cortez. That's one thing he does do that is famous. He founds Mexico City. It's found on top of the ruins, of course, of Tenochtitlan. There's still some ruins there of it, like some of the temples are actually still there of the Aztecs. And then Mexico City will end up, I'll get to it later, but it ends up becoming like the capital of what they call New Spain. That's what they originally called Mexico, that the Spanish colonized at that point. So that's who Cortez was. And yeah, Cortez was vicious. He killed off a lot of the Native Americans there in Mexico to conquer the whole thing. And I did want to show you a brief, couple of videos about the Spanish conquistadors and how they were able to conquer so quickly. It wasn't just because of the European diseases that were brought over and all that, but it was also because of their technologies that they had. You see how their technology was so much better, of course, compared to the Maya or Aztecs or any Native Americans in the New World. And it was just devastating, with that. Their armor was, obviously, they couldn't penetrate it and all that. There was actually a famous conquistador that went with Cortez. His name was Bernal Diaz. You may have heard of him. He wrote a history of Conquest of Mexico called The True History of the Conquest of Mexico. There was a battle in Tabasco country. I think they call it the Battle of the Tabasco River or something like that, where 500 conquistadors of Cortez fought against 10,000 Mayan warriors, and they wiped them out, because of their technology. So it was almost like aliens coming from outer space, it was just no equal, with that. All right, if I got a few minutes left, let me talk about one more thing for today, and I want to get into and talk about also. So, Cortez, actually, that was the actual official date, by the way, when Cortez does meet, of course, Montezuma, November 8th, 1519. Yeah, the first big meeting of the worlds, at least between, the old world and the new world. Then you got, of course, the other conquistador I didn't talk about much, which was Francisco Pizarro. Pizarro was an older conquistador who conquered the Incas and the Inca Empire in Peru in his 60s. He was really old in the 1530s. And Pizarro, a little bit about his background. He was originally from Spain. And Trujillo, I think was the city he was from, Trujillo, which is in Spain. And he actually came to the New World and was involved with Vasco da Balboa. He was actually involved with Balboa in his discovery of the Pacific Ocean. Told you about 1513. And then he was kind of a powerful mayor and governor of Panama, above South America. And what happened was in the 1520s, he heard about the Inca Empire and what he thought was also a lost cities of gold. And so he got together several expeditions to push down into South America, which took him years to do this, several expeditions, 2 or 3, I believe. And finally, in 1532, his forces pushed from up in here down into what is Peru. And eventually what happened was in 1532, if you want the official date, which was November 16th, 1532, he met the emperor or ruler of the Incas, which was Atahalpa, at what is the city of Cajamarca. I'll give you the name of the battle that they fought. Usually called the Battle of Cajamarca. It's considered one of the turning points in the Americas. Was 1532 is the year. Anyway, Atahualpa thought they were just going to have a friendly meeting. And of course, what happened, if you know about it, Pizarro, who was aided, by the way, by Hernando de Soto, attacked his forces, Atahualpa's forces, and they captured Atahualpa. I think they killed like 2,000 of his soldiers, and a bunch of other people were captured. And they forced Atahualpa to pay them a ransom, which was something like 20, 30 tons worth of gold, which you see may have been like, I don't know if it was that much, but it may have been worth I don't know if it was 800 million, but it may have been. But you have to get different numbers on how much it is now. But now it might be 800 something million. They were forced to pay a ransom. And if you know the story about this, Atahualpa filled like 2 rooms full of gold and silver. Like you drew a line on the wall, and they filled it up to it, which took like several months, I think. And Atahualpa thought the Spanish were going to spare him and all that. But they killed him instead. They strangled him, you know, about this. And then from there, Pizarro and his men were kind of able to try to basically take over Peru at that point. Now, there was another Inca ruler. His name was Manco Inca. I don't know if you ever heard of him. But Manco Inca was a brother of Atahualpa, who's right here. And at first, they put him on the throne as like a puppet ruler under Pizarro. And they mistreated Manco. They mistreated him badly. I think they even killed his wife. And so Manco decided to rebel. So in 1536, I think like early February, it looks like 1536, he rebelled in what became like a 10-month rebellion against the Spanish in the capital of Cusco. And it would have succeeded. However, what happened was Manco's forces were decimated by disease, which they think was likely smallpox. And then the Spanish were able to get reinforcements. And so Manco had to abandon that. And in 1537, he actually retreated into the Andes Mountains. And he founded this, I don't know if you know much about it, but he founded this I'll put it right here, but he founded what became known as the Inca Empire at a place called Vilcabamba. Yeah, Vilcabamba. Vilcabamba became this famous Inca city that became known as the Lost City of the Incas. You may have heard about it, which was found in the early 1900s. And he kind of made his capital there, which would be probably in the jungles of Peru, to about maybe 1572, I believe, was when it eventually collapsed. And but the Spanish eventually killed him. And then Manco had a son named Tupac. I think they called him Tupac Amaru, I believe his name was. I think that's where the name Tupac comes from, I believe, originally. And they killed him too, also. The Incas tried to create this neo-Inca empire in the jungles of Peru, but it failed. And Vilcabamba was like considered one of the last strongholds of the Incas before the Spanish really start taking over the Americas a lot, like in South America as a whole. So kind of a sad story about that. Pizarro was ruthless, though, man. He killed a lot of Indians in South America. And Peru would go on to become like one of the viceroyalties, colonies of Spain in South America, which we eventually broken up. But yeah, there is one thing that Pizarro is famous for, by the way. Pizarro is the one they do give credit for. He's the founder of Lima, which is, if you know about the capital of Peru today. He would actually found it in the 1530s, which is located on the Pacific Ocean, if you know about this. And Cusco originally was the capital of like Peru, or the Incas, which is still there. But he would replace it with Lima after that. So, yeah, Pizarro, Cortez, those were the two, worst of the conquistadors that would come. Pizarro actually was killed by his own men because they were kind of like, that's one thing that kind of happened among a lot of these conquistadors. They were they were bloodthirsty for not only wealth and riches, but for control of power. And a lot of them were out of control, what they were doing in the New World. And what would happen is the crown under emperor or king, really king of Spain, King Charles of Spain, also known as Emperor Charles V, he would have to put in viceroys to kind of control things, which would be personally appointed by him. And then from there, things would get better as a whole. But we'll talk about it later on Thursday about the different viceroyalties they set up in Spain. I'll talk about what the Spanish did with the Native Americans, because if you know about them, they used them as slave labor for a while, the so-called encomienda system they had. I'll talk about the different racial mixes that make up also the New World after the Spanish came, and the different social classes that they had, and so on. And after I finish talking about the conquistadors, we'll probably move on to also talk about the age of absolutism. So we're not going to have time to finish all the conquistadors today, but in the conquest of America, but we got through most of it today overall. Now, I think I'm going to wait on, I'll wait on Thursday's class to review. This is a long enough video, I think, for today, but I'll review over this section of the conquistadors, and then what we'll do is I'll go in and finish the rest, and we'll talk about the age of absolutism. Okay, so that's it for today. Also, a reminder before we go, don't forget that Canvas quiz on the Reformation. I will have it up a little bit longer because of the Labor Day holiday. So make sure you finish that by Thursday. And then, of course, you've got the two new Canvas quizzes I've got posted. One, of course, on the Hernan Cortes video documentary to watch. And then the other Canvas quiz on the World Exploration Age of Discovery lectures from week 2. So that's it for today. If you have any questions about my lecture, let me know about it. Does anybody have any questions right now before I go? I just wonder if anybody wants to send me any questions about that right now. So let me know if you have any questions overall. And I will put up some videos from what we showed today. And I do have a bunch of other videos I will be showing, of course, on my YouTube channel. You can look at, I have like an area called the short videos of history. Yeah, short history videos I've got. So check out those. If you want to take a look at some other history stuff I've got about the conquistadors. So send me any questions you got, comments about this lecture, and I'll see you on Thursday to wrap up about the conquistadors and then to move on to the age of absolutism. So y'all take care. Hope y'all are having a good morning, and I hope y'all had a good Labor Day holiday break, before we came back. So see y'all later. Take care.